Okay, Lexa here coming to you from the future, just because I feel like I need to do a slight little bitty introduction to this video because I had no idea where it was going when I started. I just turned the camera on and started talking about the first book. I ended up finding it along the way, and if you have already seen the title of this video, then you know that we are on a mission to find my first 5-star read of the year, because I have not read a 5-star book since I read Vampires of El Norte and Our Share of Night back in the 1st of December. It's been a while. It's going on 4 months at this point. 3.5, technically. It feels like forever. I think my average rating for books in February was like a 2.7. Listen, I don't want to talk about it, okay? It's been rough out here. I've been in the trenches with trying to find... I still love reading, but I feel like I've just been reading to read because I love the act of reading, not because I've been loving the things I've been reading, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's what this vlog ended up turning into, is me being on a mission, and you're just gonna have to stick along for the ride to see if we accomplished it, but... Or maybe I already spoiled it. I found my first 5-star read of the year. And actually, there's a little bit of a twist to that, but I'll let you figure that out along the way. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Yesterday was a big day. I went to go get my hair done professionally, other than getting it cut when I had that coconut haircut. The first time anyone has ever touched my hair with bleach, other than myself, since like 2020, before the pandemic. It was getting to the point that all of the bleach that was on my head was what I had done myself. Therefore, most of it was like what I could see and easily tackle in the mirror. So a lot of like these underneath parts and like the back, I just didn't fuck with because I have so much hair and it's hard to like reach and see back there. So I was just like, meh, the back of my head is not any of my business. So I ended up going to get my hair done. It looks so much better. I am so much happier with it. It's perfect timing for my birthday. My birthday is coming up here in like less than 10 days. So I'll have hair that like I just feel good about, which I haven't in a hot minute. And I thought this would also be a great time for me to update you that I did read, sorry I didn't update you before I finished it, but I did read and finish Seasonal Fears by Seanan McGuire, which if you have watched some of my videos before, you might know I was very nervous about and almost didn't know if I was gonna read it because Middle Game is one of my favorite books of all time. And I had heard a lot of people didn't like Seasonal Fears as much as they liked Middle Game, and it was like a huge disappointment for a lot of people. Part of me was like, okay, if she's not gonna continue in this series, maybe it's best for me, even though I owned Seasonal Fears, to just pretend that Middle Game is a standalone and not even fuck with Seasonal Fears. That way it doesn't ruin it for me. I knew that Seasonal Fears followed different characters. In Middle Game, we follow Roger and Dodger. I loved those characters so fucking much. And I knew that in Seasonal Fears, we were following 2 different people. And the plot of this series is so fucking hard to explain because it's very Seanan McGuire in that it's like convoluted and you don't really know what's going on until you do. But basically there's like this evil science bro dude who has this evil science bro plot to basically be this like all-encompassing super powerful being by turning concepts into like putting concepts into humans and having like the human embodiment of like math and language. And for example, in the second book, seasons. So we are following the human embodiment of summer and winter. It's not just like adults that pop up one day and they are like gods. It's like kids. Like he makes kids for this. It's so hard to explain. It's incredible. Read Middle Game. Would I recommend Seasonal Fears? The thing is, why I decided to read this is because she is continuing on, and the next book in the series, Tidal Creatures, is coming out this year, here in a couple of months. So I was like, okay, maybe I will, like I love Seanan McGuire's writing, maybe I'll really love this more than other people did. And if I'm gonna continue on in the series, I want to have read this. The thing that made me a little bit nervous is that I had heard from people that even though we're following different characters in this one, there was a cameo to some of the characters from Middle Game, and people weren't super excited about how that was done. And part of me was like, what do you mean? Like any more time that I get to spend with those characters, I'm in. And now I get it. Now I get it. Because the thing is that I was liking this book for the majority, like I wasn't loving it the way that I loved Middle Game, but I knew it wasn't gonna be Middle Game and I was fine with that, and I went in with realistic expectations. As we were following, what are their names? They don't have weird rhyming names. Harry? Wouldn't have guessed that, and I read that whole book. Melanie has a heart condition, and they kind of grew up childhood best friends to more than that. You know, it was kind of just always assumed that for however long Melanie got to live, Harry and her were gonna be together. And we quickly find out that what I thought was gonna be the majority of the plot of this book was this kind of like game competition for them to fight for their seasons, basically. But they're also just like normal high schoolers who are having to come to terms with finding out that they are not just human. There's more to them and more to their families and their fates and the world and the people around them. And there are cameos about halfway through the book. And it's not just a cameo. They like become part of the plot, the characters from book one. And all that really did was remind me of how incredible and powerful and awesome those characters are, and how meh our characters Melanie and Harry are in this book, and how meh the plot is of this book, especially compared to Middle Game. I'm almost glad that I didn't reread Middle Game before reading this, because I think it would have even made it more obvious how not great this is compared to that. And I just think when you start off with a bang like Middle Game, it's hard. Where do you go from there? She really, really backpedaled on the plot, on how much she fell in love with the characters, on just the characters' power and ability, and therefore the scope of what you can do with the plot in the world. But also, it wasn't really, like, we didn't spend much time in the game. I guess technically the game had started, but it was basically just them traveling from Portland to wherever this magical game was happening and meeting some of the characters from book one along the way. And I don't like a travel story, and it was just so underwhelming and so slow paced. And the only reason I would recommend this is to read the next book. I don't know if you will need to have read this one for the next one. So maybe when that one comes out, I'll read that and then I can give more of a definitive answer on whether I would recommend just skipping this one or not. You definitely would have to have read Middle Game to even understand what the fuck is going on for a good chunk of this book, because it's not explained, because it's assumed that you know who the characters are that they are interacting with and like their background, and it's a lot of unspoken inside jokes kind of feeling. And that just didn't work for me, because then I just was like, okay, can we ditch these summer and winter children and go back to Roger and Dodger, please? Thank you, that would be great. And I don't think that's what you want people feeling while they're reading your book. That's not about those characters. But at the end of the day, I knew that this was a gamble. I'm not mad that I read it. I'm actually really glad that I did, so that I can have read this and now mentally prepare myself for Tidal Creatures, and now it makes me want to go back through and reread Middle Game. I definitely don't think by any means it ruined Middle Game for me though, which was my main fear. If anything, it just made me appreciate that book so much more by getting a reminder of how incredible that plot and those characters were. Okay, now that my hair is like curled and waved more like how I typically do it, I'm just so happy. I love this. I love being a little bit blonder. I just feel so much more like myself again. And we are coming up on the year anniversary of Coconut Head haircut in 2023. So the fact that we went from that to this, those were dark times. Oh, did I say what my rating for this book is? I think it's like a 2-star. It was just a whole lot of nothing, and it didn't grow my understanding of what the magic system in this, not in this world, because it is set in our world, the magic system of this alternate version of our world, it didn't grow my understanding of that. Like the way that Middle Game just absolutely blew your mind. I would have thought that we would have gotten more reveals and a deeper understanding of how this magic works and how like this alchemy works in this world, because it's based a lot on alchemy. What was the point? I started reading Throne of the Fallen by Kerri Maniscalco. Why, you may ask? Good question. I apparently put a hold on both the ebook and the audiobook at some point on Libby, and they both became available at the same time, and I just felt like that was the universe telling me that I should read this book. All I really know about it is that it's romantasy. It was in the Goodreads Choice Awards for the romantasy category last year, and it's the first in the series. I've seen this cover a lot, and I feel like a lot of people really love it. I was a little hesitant because I realized that it was a first in a series, and I was like, oh my god, do I really want to start another series again? But what I think from reading like a quick little blurb of the synopsis of book 2, it's like a romance series where it follows different characters, because in this one, we are following one of, let's try that again. This feels a little tilted. It is, but we're just gonna go with it. Because in this one, we're following one of the 7 like deadly sins. They've manifested into, they're princes of hell / demons in this world. And we're following the Prince of Envy. He is the love interest. And then our main character, Camilla, is a girl who's living in this town, who's also this incredibly talented artist who has gotten herself seemingly kind of mixed up in doing forgery of different art pieces along with this other guy in the town that she absolutely hates, but she's kind of gotten roped into that and now he's using it to blackmail her. And in the midst of that, the Prince of Envy is playing this game, this immortal game that kind of starts off at the beginning. There are a few rules that are listed, I can't remember all of them, but one of them is that for each clue that you're given throughout this game, you only get 3 chances to make that clue happen or like move on to the next clue. So he's basically on shot number 2 with Camilla because he walks in, he's like, hey, I need you to paint this thing for me. And she's like, do I look like an idiot to you? I'm not painting that. That is a hexed object. And he's like, okay. So then he tries again and she's like, no, thank you. And he's like, fuck, I only have one more chance. How do I get her to work with me? Because his clue basically told him it has to be her who paints this thing for him to move on in this game. And let me tell you, it is immediately spicy. We immediately have tension and lust and feelings. And she is like fantasizing about him in the back of her carriage. And to my lovely surprise, most of the writing of the smut scenes, sometimes it doesn't work for me. Sometimes it makes me cringe. And when it works and I love it and I eat it up. But a lot of language and like the way that sometimes authors will write things, I'm not big into euphemisms and other words for body parts that are like way out there and trying to like not say what we're saying. That's not my thing. Just say it. Just tell me the hot stuff that's going on. And so far it's not too cringy. And I started this like late last night and I read like 30% of it, which is saying a lot because this book is like 600 and some pages, like maybe almost 700 pages, possibly. It's large and in charge, okay? Like some other things. Anyway, we're getting hints that there's a lot of secrets being kept from us. I think I possibly know where the major one is going, but I'm excited to have this like immortal game aspect, especially since the last, okay, dude, you've got to stop knocking the camera. It's waving it back and forth all over the place. Oliver keeps like knocking up against the camera and that's why it keeps shaking. He's like circling it. And my floors are so uneven in this house that like if you're even walking around it, it shakes. But anyway, what I was saying is that I'm excited that we're getting another shot at this immortal game aspect since the immortal game aspect in Seasonal Fears didn't quite pan out. Hopefully this one will. But I am feeling their dynamic. I like that so far Camilla, like she's put in situations where she needs rescuing a lot, but it also seems like she can handle things herself. Like there was one scene that I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be a setup for him to come and like damsel in distress moment of Camilla and he's gonna whoosh in and save her. And that's not what happened. She took things into her own hands. Quite literally. And I appreciated that. Oliver, you can't just stab yourself in the eye with my finger. Come here. So Oliver and I are going to continue reading this and I'll keep you updated. Say hi. Hello. I'm being a menace. What is this? Sir, please do not start calling her pet. Okay, he hasn't called her pet in any of the smutty scenes yet, but I feel like she's priming us for that. Like so far he's playing it off as like, like I know that this pisses her off, so like I'm gonna keep doing it. But I feel like she's just waiting to throw it in there. And listen, I'm not trying, if you like that, if you're into that, I love that for you. Genuinely, that's not for me. It's taking pet name a little too seriously for personally my liking. Oh no. Oh no. I'm on chapter 51. It happened. This book is fine. It was fine. Like all of my other reading this year, other than my rereads, it was fine. The game part of this book did not quite make up for the game part of Seasonal Fears. It was kind of the same thing, where they were traveling around playing this game, but like it wasn't a competition really. There were a few scenes and moments where there was like combat or they were like in the thick of it trying to figure out this next clue. But a lot of it was just like some world building, but I still don't feel like I really quite understand everything. And a few reveals and a lot of sex. Then some like solving some riddles / having a little tussle with someone. And even at the end, I feel like it had this like grand scene of like everything coming together, the will they, won't they, this is the big moment and some reveals, and it just felt a little bit underwhelming. And then even after that, we were spending a lot of time talking and doing nothing when I felt like the book should be over. And I think part of that was that we were like setting up for the next book, but I was like, okay, I really don't care. I can see why people love this. If you really like that touch her and I'll kill you, you're mine, this is gonna be the one woman who changes this man because he's been so jaded and he has a one night rule. And then like, of course, is she gonna be the one that changes his mind? But I felt like for the majority of this book, they were just like really, really lusting after each other. And it was like the sexual tension was there. But that transition between, they kind of hated each other, but not really. But like, they had no reason to trust or love each other. And I don't feel like even though we spent so much time with them talking and in their relationship, that transition between I hate you / I don't have feelings for you / I just want to fuck you and this isn't going to be anything more than that, to you are the exception to all of my rules, the love of my life, the reason that I wake and live and breathe and die. It was fast and I didn't really understand how we got there. But this might be a little bit too much information for the internet. However, here we are. I've recently discovered that I have a thing for throne scenes, and she did throw one of those in there, so I will say that she made up for the pet thing just a little bit with that. And it could just also be that I'm not in the era of my life where like that whole jealousy, envy, you're not going to be with anyone other than me, I'm going to be so jealous whenever I see you with anyone else thing just doesn't turn me on. It doesn't get me the way that I feel like it once would have. So that could also be impacting my overall enjoyment of the characters together and the smutty scenes, because they really heavily revolve around that jealousy. And also, can I say, I thought that this was going to be more of a thing, but I guess then it wasn't. His motivations for going along with the plot of this book in this game and like what he has to lose versus her motivations for going along with the plot in this game and what she has to lose just seem like they're on different levels. And that is not to undersell what she is going through and what is at stake for her. But what's at stake for him is just a lot bigger. There's a lot more at stake. It's outside of just him. Whereas hers is like a personal thing. And therefore the like stakes just felt a little off to me. And I don't want to say anything further because I don't want to give any spoilers, but I just couldn't get as into it as I wanted to for that reason. But alas, that is pretty reminiscent of all of my reading. I'm fighting so hard. I've been fighting so hard this last month and a half to not be jaded about that and to be okay and to not set large expectations for books. But it's just really difficult when like this time last year, I had read Bunny. I had read Bunny, Alone with You in the Ether, the 5th season. These are like all-time favorite books. And the fact that I haven't read a 5-star in so long and that it's like now mid-March and I haven't read a book I would even consider a favorite of the year just kind of sucks. But that's why we're here. And hopefully this vlog will end sooner rather than later. Not that I want to get this vlog over with, but that I want to find a 5-star read, please. But I'm gonna go ahead and give Throne of the Fallen like 3.5 star. This was a solid 3.5. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I'm probably going to forget the majority of this plot and these characters, and I don't think I have any reason to carry on with the next book, especially since this book was so long, and I have a feeling the subsequent books are also going to be like 600, 700 pages long, and that just feels like a lot for me when the plot didn't really do it for me, and neither did the characters. Okay, I'm now on an absolute mission to find a 5-star read, and the thing is that I want to go for books that I know could work for me, reading from authors that I have read from in the past. But when I was in a slump last year, like a 5-star slump, I tried that and it didn't work. And then I just kept being let down. And since I read a book by Shauna McGuire and then I read a romantasy, I'm thinking maybe I need to go in a bit of a different direction than I would think would typically be a 5-star. So this is gonna be such a random pick, but I've started reading Happiness Falls by Angie Kim and I'm invested. I am 20% in and I wanna know. I wanna keep going, which I wouldn't typically think, but something about it just called to me, even though I literally didn't know what this was about to start off. All I knew was that a lot of people were saying that it didn't really fit within one genre, that like it's considered a mystery thriller, I think, but that it has a lot more literary elements and that it's a little bit slower paced and it's not as wild, crazy, twisty, turny vibes as you might expect from a mystery thriller. And normally that would make me think, no, but at this point, I'm willing to try anything. So maybe it's that I just need to try to read books that are different and out of my comfort zone and not something that I would expect to be a 5-star. And with that, it's going well so far because I'm invested in what is going on with this family. We're following a Korean American family whose dad just recently, like the dad of the family, he's gone missing. We have our main character, Mia, her twin brother, and then her younger brother, Eugene, and then the mom. Those are the main players here. We are mainly in Mia's perspective, and there's a lot of like stream of consciousness. It feels like we are truly in her head, seeing things, like getting all of her thoughts as everything is happening here. And it does something that I really love in all types of books, but especially the mystery thriller kind, which is that sense of foreboding. It's kind of like she's writing this from the future, talking about what happened and what she was thinking, and her feeling like she needs to justify to the reader why she ignored certain signs or why she did what she did. Because basically what happens at the beginning of this book is Mia is in the middle of like breaking up with her boyfriend on the phone, and then she's like, okay, I gotta go, and she sees her younger brother Eugene running alone to the house. And this is weird for a few different reasons. Eugene was supposed to be out with her dad by like in the park or going walking in the park or going hiking by the trail. He's a lot younger, and he also is autistic and has a rare condition called Angelman syndrome. Yes. So he doesn't speak, and it just is like obviously out of the ordinary for him to be running alone. Through a series of events, she thinks that her dad comes home, and then by the end of the day, they start to realize that like things are off. And again, we're getting that perspective of like, well, now that I know what I know, I wish that I would have looked up whenever I heard footsteps in the driveway to see if it was dad or not, and not just assume it was. It was weird that Eugene was like running alone, and that he then was like going up to his room, and he was like bouncing on his bouncing like trampoline thing that he usually does whenever he is like really overstimulated, and to help him calm down. And I love that perspective. And we're also getting that perspective in a way that makes us know that there's information we're not being told yet. And that just, I eat that up. So even though that this is moving pretty slowly, even 20% of the way through, we're really only to the first day of like the police looking for the dad and us not really having any answers, and just getting a look into these different family dynamics and how everyone kind of plays their specific role inside of the family, especially through Mia's eyes. It still in some ways does feel fast-paced. It feels like something I don't want to put down. And I'm loving the audiobook experience of this so far. I originally was just reading this on my Kindle, but then I went to go take a shower and do some cleaning around the house, so I popped the audiobook in, and I was like, oh yeah, this is how I want to listen to it. This is how I want to consume this, whether it is just listening to it or listening and reading at the same time. I'm gonna carry forward with that. It is so good. I know Gabby gave this 5 stars. It might have been on her top books of the year. Don't quote me on that though. It's promising. It's promising. I don't know why I'm feeling like I need to justify this choice to you. I just feel like I'm having to justify like all of my reading choices to myself, because I feel like I'm picking out the wrong books, and I don't know why. I did almost have to, oh my God, not the lip biting thing again. I did almost have to DNF this at around the 50% mark. I think it's because it's like so well written, and it just hits in a very specific way that is it hits close to home. I can very much relate to a lot of the fears that are coming up for her in terms of being the older sister to a brother with disabilities who can't communicate in a way that other people are going to understand and advocate for himself all of the time. And then therefore, when the criminal justice system gets involved and shitty cops get involved, how scary and overwhelming and frustrating that can feel. There comes a point in this novel where I thought it was going in one direction that is literally, whoo, am I gonna cry? Yeah. I literally just put on my makeup. So it's not that I care about like crying is good, but I don't want to cry because I just put on my makeup. I forgot what I said, where I left off. But a lot of the fears that Mia is facing, like the direction I thought that this book was going for a second is like one of my biggest fears. I read a lot of horror, a lot of dark things, and I've never really encountered anything that I thought was like too triggering for me, which I don't think is like a flex or anything. I think that it was just like something I never really had to worry about. But this was hitting so close to home that it was hitting on fears that like I knew I had, and I've thought about, and I've talked about it in therapy a lot, that I've just never seen done so closely in a book. So it's not that I had to like I thought I was gonna have to DNF it because I wasn't enjoying it, but just because I thought I wasn't gonna be able to, like, I thought it wouldn't put me in a good headspace. But I ended up, after I took a break for a few days, and then I decided I was just going to read, like as soon as I thought that that's where it was headed, I took a break and decided I was gonna like finish out the chapter and see if I could handle that, but it ends up going in a different direction. There's like a reason that doesn't happen, this thing doesn't happen. So the tension is still there, very much so, the tension that we've been facing since the beginning of where's her dad. There's a lot that she's finding out about her dad that she didn't know about, and then also how her brother Eugene plays a role in this, and how much people's expectations of Eugene, did I call him Gene? His name is Eugene. And their assumptions about him, their family included, like largely their family, and their assumptions and their own trauma have impacted him, and it's all kind of like come down to this point in time, in this moment. But I'm now at the 70% mark, and honestly, I've wanted to finish this, but I haven't been around my camera, and I've been holding off so that I could update you one more time before I finished it, because I'm absolutely loving this. And because obviously I didn't know anything about the plot going into this, I was not expecting for this to hit as close to home and hit as hard as it has been. But despite the fact that I just happen to like relate to Mia on so many levels, I don't think that like that's the main reason I'm enjoying this. I think it is just so well done. Normally, the thing is, I want to say, like, I understand what people are saying about you might not enjoy this if you're wanting a super twisty mystery and that this is more family drama. And I do think that that's true, but I don't typically enjoy family dramas, and I don't typically enjoy mystery thriller books that are like domestic mystery thriller books aren't usually my favorite. But I guess that's usually because it's about like a husband and wife and like one of them is probably cheating. I understand it's more family drama, but it is still revolving around this huge mystery of what the fuck happened to her dad, and also what the fuck was her dad up to? How did the family not know so much about what was going on in his life, and why? And why was he not sharing that when that seems so counterintuitive to who she believed her dad was and who the rest of her family believed her dad was and who it seems like we're supposed to believe her dad was. I'm someone who likes to read multiple books at a time. Usually the like perfect amount for me is 3. Whenever I would read a lot of physical books, I would usually read 3 books at a time. An audiobook, an ebook, and then a physical book. I tell you this because we've run into an issue here. Typically what I will do is, even though I'm reading multiple books at a time, I will like film the updates for those chronologically, obviously, since I am existing in a reality time that is linear. But then I will go back through, how is my camera already dying? But then I'll go back through and edit them all together so that I'm talking about just like one book from start to finish, my thoughts on it at a time throughout the video. That way you are not left jumping back and forth between updates trying to keep up with which book I'm talking about. And I've just found that for vlog form, that is a lot easier and makes things a little bit more streamlined. However, it has become a little bit of an issue in this vlog, mainly because I did not see this coming, but I've read 2 5 stars. I already updated you and I already filmed the first 2 updates for Happiness Falls. But before I finished Happiness Falls, I read a novella, we'll talk about here in a second, and I gave it 5 stars. And in my mind, I just thought to myself, okay, no worries. Chances are, like the fact that I immediately after filming the clip where I was like, I am dedicated to getting 5 stars, read a 5-star novella, and I read it all at like 3 a.m. so I didn't even tell you that I was reading it. I started and finished it, and then I read it again in that same day because I loved it so much. I can just put that clip at the end of this vlog, because the fact that I've read 20 plus books this year, plus however many I read in December since the last time I gave a book 5 stars, the chances that Happiness Falls is going to be 5 stars just statistically is pretty minimal considering how my reading has been going lately. So I can film the updates for Happiness Falls, tell you my rating for that one, continue on my journey for 5 stars, faking it a little bit for the vlog just for like the continuity, knowing that like I did already read a 5-star book, but then like coming clean to you about that at the end of the vlog whenever I talked about the novella that I just read. But before sitting down to film that update for the novella, I was like, well, I might as well finish reading Happiness Falls so that I can film both of those updates and the intro and conclusion just all right now in one swoop. And I finished Happiness Falls and it was a 5-star. So that leaves, which would not normally be an issue except for the fact that this vlog's theme is trying to find a 5-star. And in order for me to tell you about my first 5-star that I read this year, I would have to either completely cut out Happiness Falls or admit all of this to you and just give you the updates on 2 back-to-back 5-star books. And that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so let's quickly go ahead and get into the end of Happiness Falls, how I felt about that, why it's a 5-star, that way we can conclude my wrap up for that book, and then I will tell you about the novella that I read that was technically my first star read of the year. This book was incredible. And the fact that I loved it so much and it's so far out of what I ever would have guessed would be something that I would give 5 stars to, especially since it is not genre defying in the way that I normally like things, which are like horror but literary and a little bit fantastical. That's typically the kind of genre defying book that I read that I love, but a literary fiction family drama with a mystery in it, never would have guessed. And I do think objectively like this is just a really well written and constructed and designed and done book. But I also think a lot of my enjoyment of it and why it was so impactful for me is because of the ways in which I relate so personally to a lot of like what is going on here. But I want to talk about some of the themes that this book explores because it is so much more than just this like mystery and family dynamics. It talks a lot about like exploring how we often in society equate someone's intelligence or capabilities with their ability to speak, like verbally, vocally speak to people. And we see that with the autistic community. We see that with Eugene, who is autistic and has Angelman syndrome, who can't speak. And therefore, a lot of people around him, including his family, have like labeled him as cognitively impaired, having a low IQ, assuming that he doesn't really understand what's going on. And the way that she explores that and people's assumptions, and not only just strangers' assumptions, but also the people, like well-meaning people, like his family members, his mom, his sister, his dad, his brother, who all love him, but don't always love him in the way that he needs to be loved and have their own assumptions and the way that they've projected on that and the injustices that they have done to him because of that, along with the societal injustices that come along with not being able to communicate in the way that people expect and then how they perceive you because of that. Angie Kim also does a really good job talking about that in relation to Mia's mom, who is Korean, and talks about how when she first moved over here and she didn't speak English, how a lot of the people around her thought she was stupid. And at first she thought that that was just her own insecurities, assuming that they thought that, but then as soon as she started to learn more English and she was able to understand them, she figured out that like, no, that is what people are thinking about you. And then how race plays a role in that, because switching that around, her dad, who I believe is white, whenever they lived in Korea and he came over there and he didn't speak Korean, her mom was talking about how people over in Korea didn't view him as stupid and uneducated or lesser than, in the same way that people in America viewed her that way because of the privilege of being a native English speaker, being white. The fact that he didn't speak Korean wasn't viewed in the same way as the fact that she didn't speak English. Then on top of those conversations that we're having about language and our assumptions that we make about people, there's also this conversation about happiness, what it means to be happy, how we can increase our happiness, if that is even, like, is worrying about being the happiest that you can possibly be even the ultimate goal? And what if it's not? And how does happiness look on different people? Because of the information that her dad was exploring, and he was like really looking into happiness. That's kind of what, like, as they are uncovering what was going on with their dad and the secrets that he had, that's a big part of what he was looking into. I saw in some of the reviews, I was just going through reading like the 3-star reviews to see people who just found this okay, like what parts of this did they like and what parts didn't they. And I saw a lot of feedback that having this perspective from like first person, Mia's perspective, kind of stream of consciousness, negatively impacted the reading experience for some people. And I can see that because she feels so deeply human. I can relate to her in a lot of ways in terms of like her position in this family and as an older sister and the fears that she has. Also, we're very different in a lot of ways. She's very analytical. She overthinks a lot of things. She's in her early 20s trying to figure out her place in this world, what she wants, how that fits in with her family dynamic. Also is like very biased in the way that like humans tend to be, right? It's very hard for us to recognize our flaws and to see when we have like our heart set on something or we see something a certain way, to take a step back and view things from a different light and to view things from other people's perspectives, or to question whether our assumptions about things are correct, especially when we're young, right? And she's very much that way. So the fact that you are getting this story through her mind and through her voice, and it is more just everything that she's thinking in these moments as she's retelling this to you, I could see being exhausting. But I was also a little bit surprised to see that, because I thought that's what made this story so good and feel so real, is that she was fucking aggravating sometimes. And the way that she overthinks things sometimes is kind of exhausting. And she's not always perfect, and she's gonna say things that you don't agree with and make mistakes and sometimes not own up to those mistakes. Because of that, she feels so human, because we all do that, right? Like, we're all gonna say things that we regret. We're all going to not apologize for things that we should have apologized for. But she also experiences a lot of growth throughout this novel, to the point that like I wasn't so annoyed with her that it ever would have affected my experience. It only added to it, making her in the entire situation just feel so much more real. So giving a Lit Fit book as like my technically second, but one of my first 5 stars of the year. Never would have seen it coming. So happy that I read this. Absolutely recommend. If you're gonna read it, I would, and you're debating on whether you want to listen to the audiobook, I think the audiobook is incredible. Real fast, I'm gonna go grab another camera battery. This died so freaking quickly. And then I'm gonna update you on what was technically my first 5-star read of the year. Not technically, it like actually was. It was my first 5-star read. Okay. So I've heard people talk about the Singing Hill cycle, and I knew I would get to it eventually, but I never had concrete plans of when I was going to start it. I'm so glad that I did. I could not fall asleep the other night at like 2 a.m. I was bored with the books that I was reading, one of which I think I'm going to talk about here in a different vlog because I haven't finished it yet. And I wanted to start a new book that I also specifically wanted an ebook and an audiobook to like simultaneously read. For one reason or another, I couldn't tell you exactly why I picked this. I decided to start Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. I did not plan on finishing this. I was hoping that maybe it would gently caress me to sleep and get my mind to shut off enough. And I ended up staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning and reading it and then starting it again immediately to reread it. And then I read it a second time. I finished it whenever I woke up because I loved this so much. The thing is, I hate, like, I was like, of course this was my first 5-star of the year. I didn't tell you I was gonna read it. I didn't do any updates throughout it, which is okay because it is such a short novella that I don't actually, that's the other thing that's tricky about this being the first 5-star read of the year, the anticipation that we've been building up to, is that it's hard to talk about because you can't talk much about the plot because A, it's a novella and it's a short novella. I think it's like 120 pages long. So there's not a lot that I could say that wouldn't give things away. But B, it's also one of those stories that like I didn't read the synopsis, so I didn't know anything going into it. And it's convoluted at first for a reason. You are just thrown into the middle of this high fantasy world that the way the language is written, it's not straightforward and it is a little bit flowery at times and a little bit vague on purpose, to the point that like for 40% of this, which again, it's short, but like for almost half of the novella, I was so enthralled and I didn't want to stop reading, but I could not have told you what was going on or what this was really about or where the plot of this was going. But if you know me and my reading, if someone described a book to me like that, I'd be like, say no more. Don't feel like you need to tell me anything about the synopsis. I'm sold. Especially if you threw in the fact, the other thing that I thought I knew about this and was correct is that it's queer and that there's like a non-binary main character. Come, literally you have to say no more. So this empire that we're thrown into in this high fantasy world is kind of reminiscent of like Imperial China. There's definitely a lot of inspiration taken from that. And you can feel that almost like right away. The atmosphere that this little novella creates without being too over descriptive, because I could not care less about descriptions of atmosphere most of the time. It just makes you feel all encompassed in the vibes. And that I do care about. They're going to investigate cabin, ? We're following Chi, fantastical creature companion, listening to her story. We're being told the story by her family because boxes of Dai. Emperor, the king at that time. I have been sitting here trying to explain this novella for like longer than it took for me to read it, I swear to God. So this is told in 2 kind of parallel, simultaneous points of view. One of them is Chi and their animal, ? Companion, Almost Brilliant, that's their name. Chi is like a cleric whose job it is to collect stories. And they end up quickly running into Rabbit, who is an older woman. That's the other perspective, is we get to be in these stories that she is telling Chi about the time that she spent with the Empress. Talking about how when she was younger, she was sent by her townsfolk because they were short like 5 barrels of dye that they were having to give to the Emperor. And in hopes that that would make up for it, they sent her along to basically work for free in the palace. And through that, she ended up becoming close with the Empress and had a lot of stories because no one really knew. There was this time period that the Empress spent in exile that no one knew much about, but Rabbit was there with her. We're getting this kind of back and forth between her, she will tell the story, and then there's this repeat element of asking Chi, do you understand? Do you see what I'm trying to tell you here? Do you see the importance of these stories? Are you not only hearing me, but understanding? And listen, that might not seem like the most interesting thing, but just give it a shot. I think it's gonna be, you either love it or you hate it. If you are going into it though and you are confused, just know I was also confused. I enjoy being confused though, and I'm along for the ride for a book that you just have to go with the flow and you know that eventually it's all gonna start coming together. And for me, that's what this was, and I thought it was done brilliantly. And I think that this is a good way to try that out if you are not sure if that's your vibe, since it is such a short novella. You know that instead of like something like The Fifth Season, which is very similar, where you know kind of like for like half of it, you just have to go with the flow and you're not gonna know what's going on and then it's all gonna come together. But for half of it is like still a lot of pages. This, you know that at least if that's not your thing and it doesn't come together for you, you haven't wasted like too much time on it and you haven't spent too much time being confused. And I just absolutely ate this up. So because of the structure of this, how you spend a lot of time really not understanding, and I wasn't worried about understanding. I had the belief that it was going to be kind of like this, and that I would eventually piece it together, and that I was just going with the flow. So I wasn't spending too much time rereading things, trying to figure out what I didn't understand, because I didn't think that that was the point. And I think I was right. But because of that, I went back and immediately that's why I started another reread of it. And it was so good because then once you do know where the story is going, and then you're rereading it and you can see all of those kind of pieces together and the things that didn't quite stick with me because I was still in that area of hazy confusion had meaning and purpose and like they were foreshadowing things that I never would have expected. It was just so good. If you are wanting a queer fantasy novella, pick this up, try it out. 5 stars. I loved it and I can't wait to read the rest of the series. I thought for some reason that this was kind of like an episodic, is that the right word? I don't think so. I thought this was the kind of novella that we were following, kind of like the Wayward Children series. No, that's not a good comparison. That would be a good comparison for, I thought it was like the Wayward Children series for the books that are about one child's world, where we are following different characters in each novella. But I actually think that we're following still our main character, Chi, and their companion, Almost Brilliant, but just in like a different setting. Like no longer following all of the same characters. But I don't know because I haven't read it and I don't want to read the synopsis too far into that one. I just read the first like sentence. But anyway, I've been sitting here rambling long enough in this one little spot on my couch. I apologize for the fact that the structure of this got a little bit confusing. However, sorry not sorry, because I read 2 back-to-back 5 stars, which I'm sure probably if my reading continues how it has been, I imagine these would make it to the best of the year because, I don't know, don't put that energy out there. I put the energy in the world that I was dedicated to finding a 5 star and then it happened. So maybe this is just gonna be 5 star after 5 star after 5 star banger. I'm still waiting for that feeling that I had of like all-time favorites that I don't think either of these, although only time will tell, but like neither of these feel like a Raven Boys or a Bunny or an Alone with You in the Ether or a 5th Season. But that's okay. Not all 5 stars can be, and that's not what I was looking for. That was not the bar. The bar was just something that I loved, that I wanted to talk a lot about, that made me excited to keep reading, and that's exactly what these did. So I'm happy. And maybe this has taught me that I need to be willing to branch out. I've already been thinking about this a little bit more and go more into literary fiction. Not all of the time. And I still think it helps when it has a different element to it, like that mystery element or a fantastical element. But maybe I am in my era of being okay with slower paced, more character-driven, non-fantastical stories. I don't know. We'll see. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave a little heart emoji down in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!